Hello, I'm Cheryl Weens. I'm a teacher consultant with the Arizona Geographic Alliance. This lesson is one that was written by one of my colleagues, a fellow teacher consultant with the Alliance, Jane Chambers. She wrote this for the geoliteracy curriculum package a few years ago, and as the name implies, it is a lesson that teaches both geography and literacy skills. She wrote it for 5th through 8th grade, and it's written for approximately 3 class periods. And the title is, Where Did My Lunch Come From? A U.S. Regional Tour. Okay, the overview of our lesson today. The United States is comprised of 5 regions: the West, the Southwest, the Midwest, the Southeast, and the Northeast. And in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on the foods that come from those various regions. For example, our orange juice from Florida citrus groves, our beef from the Texas ranches, our milk from Wisconsin dairies, bread from Nebraska grain fields, and avocados from sunny California. These regional specialties are transported cross-country to grace American dinner tables with a variety of menu choices. In many cases, agricultural products and food processing industries also define the economic flavor of the United States regions, and they establish, of course, the trade relationships, and they help to establish the trade relationships between them. So it's important for students to understand that there's an interdependent nature of the U.S. regions, and all of that interdependent nature helps to build a stronger overall economy. The purpose of our lesson is that students will identify the various agricultural products and the food processing industries that characterize each of the 5 major regions of the United States, and they will create a lunch menu that illustrates the interdependence between these regions. There's quite a long list of materials, and I won't go through every single one of those, but that, of course, is included in the lesson. And as we go through the lesson, you'll see what all the materials are that you would need to teach this lesson. Our objectives are that students will be able to locate the 5 major U.S. regions on a political map. They're going to read a National Geographic book called Travels Across America, and they're going to take notes identifying the main ideas and the supporting details on the economies of the various regions. They're going to list examples of foods produced in each region and accurately identify their regional origins on a political map of the United States. They will analyze a school lunch menu to determine the U.S. regional origins of different menu items. And lastly, they will then create an original lunch menu with food items that represent all 5 of the major U.S. regions. All right, to get started, the set activity in this lesson is asking students a survey type of question about how many of you like orange juice. Ask for a raise of hands, a show of hands. And then ask, does anyone know which U.S. state produces the most oranges? Of course, we have oranges in Arizona, but we're not the largest producer. Florida is. And then ask students to locate Florida on a map, a wall map or in the atlas, and ask what area of the United States is Florida located in? So we're going to get into the regions here. Of course, Florida is in the southeast region. Explain that geographers use the term region to refer to the area, and that ask students similar questions about foods from the other remaining regions of the United States. For example, what do we get from the West? Well, an example is we get French fries from our Idaho potatoes. From the Northeast region, we get Hershey's chocolate from Hershey, Pennsylvania. From the Midwest, we get corn products such as popcorn. And from the Southwest region, we get hamburgers from the Texas cattle ranches. And then, of course, explain that the U.S. can be divided into 5 major regions, and each region is known for producing specific foods. Procedures. Distribute copies of a political map of the United States. Now, I have 2 maps here that either one would be appropriate to use. They're both political maps of the United States. Depending upon the strengths and needs of your particular class, you could use either one. I've included here, I'm showing you here the answer key for the regions map, and then the other map is a political map of the United States without the regions and the borders drawn in. You can work it a couple of different ways. You could have students follow along with where are the borders that they need to put on the political map, or if you want to give them the regions map already there, they have it there and they can just fill in the various states. Depending upon how you're going to be using whichever map you choose to use, you don't want to take up too much space, though, with the names of the states or with coloring in at this point the various regions, because they're going to use their map a little bit later on to fill in what are the foods that come from that particular region. So they need the space to fill in what are the foods. All right, next you break the class into 5 groups, and you assign, of course, each group one of the major regions of the United States. Then what they are going to be doing is reading about the economy of that particular region that they're assigned to. The lesson includes as a resource the National Geographic set of books called Reading Expeditions, Travels Across America. And here, for example, is a copy of the book, The Midwest, and you can see on the screen we have a copy of the picture of the cover for the Southeast. These are great resources because the second chapter deals with the economy of each of the regions. Okay, and specifically, particularly with this one, it gets into the dairy belt for the Midwest region. Now, if you don't have the resources to purchase the books, or if you don't have the books on hand or in your library, I think most 5th grade textbooks would have a section on the regions of the United States that you could find this information, or of course we've got the web that you can go to and find the same information about the economies of the various regions. But let's assume that you're going to be using these books, that you have the resources at hand. And so you would instruct the students to read Chapter 2 in their assigned regional book. They need to pay particular attention to the foods that are produced in that particular region. And then they are going to be taking notes using the chapter subtitles as the main ideas, and then in each of the sub-regions, sub-areas, they need to find 2 supporting details about, for example, the dairy belt. They're going to be doing this individually. All right? When they come back then for session 2, you instruct students to meet in their respective U.S. regions group. And using their completed book notes that they did individually, then what you need to do is have them brainstorm a list of all of the foods that come from their various region. And this is where it comes back into using the regions map. Here I have one that does not have the states written in, and there's plenty of space, as you can see, to write in the different foods that come from their various regions. So they're going to go back to using this map then, and as a whole class you have the groups report out, and then everybody fills in what foods come from the 5 regions of the United States, what foods are processed there, what foods are produced in that region. All right, so students then complete their maps, and then going on to the next part of the lesson, you distribute copies of the typical school lunch menu. Now, of course, it's going to be a lot more fun if you can find a lunch menu that you use at your school. But in case you don't have one, we've included in the lesson, or Jane included in the lesson, a typical school lunch menu. And make sure that all students have a copy of this. And then they also need a handout called The Analysis of a Typical School Lunch Menu. All right, so taking the typical school lunch menu, then what the groups are going to do is, what you're going to do first, is that you're going to discuss as a whole class the menu items that are found on the typical school lunch menu, and you're going to then record it in the menu item column, and then you're going to break it down in the ingredients column as to what are the ingredients of that particular menu item. And you can see here as an example, clam chowder is the ingredients clams, potatoes, and milk. And then in the third column, students are going to locate and identify the region of the United States that those particular food products come from. Next, what you would do is discuss the organization and the format of a typical school lunch menu. So this one is pretty blah, of course, but some of them, as you know from what you see at school, they're quite elaborate. They've got lots of graphics, but they're basically broken down into usually the entree and a salad bar and some kind of a beverage that's offered. Focusing on how it typically is laid out and what it looks like as far as the subheadings and the font and the various graphics that are included. Then what they're going to do is students are going to be broken down. You're going to break them down into groups of 3 or 4. It can be the same group that read the National Geographic book, the Travels Across America, or it can be a different group, however you want to structure it based on the strengths and weaknesses of students in your class. And then they are to create an original lunch menu with food items representing all 5 U.S. regions. So they get in their groups and they create their menu. After they've created their menus, then you distribute to everybody the analysis of the group school lunch menu, which looks very similar to the other sheet that we referred to earlier, where then they are going to be analyzing their group school lunch menu to make sure that it does incorporate ingredients and food products that come from all the different United States regions, that they have all of the different regions represented in their menu. Now, if time permits, you might also want to include, or depending upon the strengths and weaknesses of your class, you may also want to include as part of the structure of the menu that they're going to create, incorporating the basic food groups that come from the food guide pyramid. The one that I'm showing here has been replaced. It's been replaced by a little bit different format, but it still is basically the same with a food pyramid structure, and you could include that as part of the requirement to include in their school lunch menu. Okay, you may need an additional session 3 where they're going to complete their menus and they're going to be analyzing their menus, and then they're going to be turning all of that in for assessment. And here's how we're going to assess it. We're going to assess students on their individual notes and an accuracy. We're going to be grading them for accuracy and for completeness. And then there's a group assessment of their menu. The group menu can be assessed with a simplified writing traits rubric, and we would look at the ideas, the area of ideas and content. And a score of 4 or higher would indicate mastery level. There are various extensions, and you've probably thought of a variety already that you might come up with for this lesson. But of course, you can bring in art, and students can design all kinds of different things on their menu. For science, students could look at various food crops and look at such things as why there's a particular crop that grows with a particular type of soil, how much water is needed, what's the climate there for optimal growth. And in the case of cattle or other livestock, what kind of land best supports grazing. For mathematics and consumer economics, they might do a cost comparison. They might price out similar food items in different regions to observe the added costs of shipping and handling. And you might also bring in a timely topic right now about what about this current issue right now about purchasing locally grown? What's the cost value of that? And for history, you could tie in an extension that have students look to see what foods were produced by the native peoples in that particular region and in that particular area, and why were those foods selected? Why did they grow in that particular area? Bringing in, of course, some geography too. All right, I hope you can see then that in this lesson that students did identify the various agricultural products and food processing industries that characterize the 5 regions of the United States, and they create a lunch menu that illustrates the interdependence between these regions. There's one more part of this lesson that I wanted to share briefly with you, that this lesson also has ELL adaptations included in it. So if you go on the Geography Alliance website, you will see that this lesson is there under the geoliteracy curriculum package, and that it does have an ELL adaptation. Part of that ELL adaptation is that there have been created key vocabulary cards with graphics to support the learning excuse me, of the ELL student. And of course, this could also be good for struggling readers as well. But it does offer support for the content accessing by your ELL students. We also have some graphics included, such as you see on the screen, and then a suggestion too that you could also, of course, incorporate your own magazines and food cutouts from magazines to support the ELL understanding of the content. Along the way in the lesson, and I'm going to just kind of go through a few of the slides that we've already gone through, there are key points in the lesson where there is support, there's scaffolding that's there for your ELL student. For example, when we ask students to fill in the maps, that is a form of guided practice for support. And of course, you could also partner your ELL students with an English-speaking student to fill out the map too, as the group is doing that. And when they're doing the reading, you can have them in smaller groups, or you could do a partner read. So there are suggestions along the way in the lesson for how this can be adapted for your ELL student. Okay, I hope that you see that this is a really good lesson that you might want to incorporate in your 5th grade classroom. That is a geography and literacy lesson combined, integrated together. And thank you very much.